I should explain that we have a certain history in that it was here in Warsaw that I first encountered Borys's film, Rewers, and was immediately very taken by it. And I arranged for a screening in London in 2011 at the Psychoanalytic Film Conference, which Borys was kind enough to come to, and had the pleasure of being grilled by several hundred psychoanalysts. Sounds bad, but many filmmakers report that they found it a very interesting experience, and many European filmmakers have come over the years. In general, psychoanalysts are nicer than film critics. They ask questions, they offer ideas, they don't try to shoot you down. What I did on that occasion I'm going to really do again, because most of you are probably not experts in Polish film history. Some of you might be, but I'm going to guess that many of you aren't. And as someone said at the last session this afternoon, the question of media and mediation was somewhat missing, at least for the part of the conference that I heard. And there was also talk about what did the experiences of repression, state repression, mean for the individuals who were being repressed, as it were, and the agents of repression. And I think a part of the answer to that lies in looking at media, at film especially, and the particular importance that film, and of course latterly television, have had in Eastern Europe. And film historians like me, of course, are always prone to overestimate the importance of film. So it's quite sobering to be at an event where nobody talks about it. Until now. So I'm going to offer you a very quick lightning tour, and this is really just as a warm-up to introducing Borys properly and really talking about his film, which I think is a wonderful new chapter in this history, which goes back certainly to the 1950s, and I think you might see even more in his film if you understand something of what came before it. That's my theory. So I think what, maybe I should get out of the way. Should I just stand to one side so you can see the screen? I'm speaking here as somebody obviously from outside Poland and from outside ex-communist East Europe, but what I can say is that for someone of my generation, the films of particularly Andrzej Wajda and Andrzej Munch were enormously important at the end of the 1950s. These were films which reached the outside world almost before any other films from communist East Europe, and they had a huge impact on audiences. In many ways they educated, perhaps to a small extent miseducated, many generations of foreign viewers. What we knew of Polish history from the point of liberation, the early years after the war, very often came from Wajda's trilogy of films, which were hugely influential in the same sort of period that Ingmar Bergman had a massive impact throughout the world. This is the golden era of art cinema. They also established certain themes about irony, particularly in the films of Munch, a very particularly distinctive Polish sense of irony and sense of black humour, which I think remained in many people's minds and is still present, as you'll see. So you can talk about, I think, two generations of Polish filmmakers who, and these are filmmakers whose work was certainly seen nationally, but was also seen internationally. This is one of the exceptional cases which was possible during the 1960s and into the 70s, where films from a country such as Poland could reach an international audience, and did. And you have when you start to look at the generations of filmmakers, I think you begin to understand what sorts of experiences had shaped them as filmmakers. And this is just the group of the best known, who are all what I would call the generation of the 20s. One of them is still very much with us, Andrzej Wajda, still chronicling, as it were, successive stages in Polish history to an outside world, and to some extent, of course, to his own national audience. You can also, I think, add to that then what I would call the 30s, 40s generation, those who were born during this band of dates and who by definition, experienced the war early in their lives, were marked in many cases by their wartime experiences, but emerged then into a landscape of filmmaking where there was certainly considerable repression and restriction on what they were able to say and to show. And in many ways these were the filmmakers who reacted not like Vaida by finding strategies to remain in place, fencing with the authorities to make the kind of films that he wanted to make, sometimes succeeding, sometimes less successful. But in some cases, of course, some of this generation were driven into emigration. Polanski, most notably, and Skolimowski. And their solution was to emigrate after their early films. Others like Zanussi, Kieślowski, stayed put, and Agnieszka Holland, of course, has worked both in Europe and in America internationally. This was a very interesting moment, I think, in the career of Polish cinema and its engagement with the climate of repression of the 1970s, because in 1981, film festival was held in Gdansk, which I was present at, and being in Gdansk in 1981 was an extraordinary experience because one could visit the Lenin shipyard, and one could also visit the first Solidarity Congress, which was taking place, and we discovered our translation systems worked. We could actually listen to that conference. On show was a film by Marczewski, Shivers, which was an extremely inflammatory film, because basically it showed the re-education of a young boy and him being turned into very much a faithful follower of state ideology, to the horror of his father. And this film, of course, would quickly disappear. It was only possible during that climate, that short window of opportunity during the Solidarity period, for films like this to be shown. That festival had about 7 or 8 films which had been banned or were unshowable, and quickly became unshowable again. And one of those films, made shortly after, Interrogation, would remain unshown, I think, until basically 89 or so. Again, a film in which Christina Janda plays someone who is interrogated brutally by the police for reasons that remain obscure. Another solution of kind was taken by Krzysztof Kieślowski. Kieślowski worked in television and in a less confrontational way in the series of films he made both before Decalogue and in this crucial series, Decalogue, which was made at another crucial moment in Polish history. These are films which again deal with private dramas, moral issues, the borderline, the fault line between personal morality and, as it were, the enforced morality of the state. And they're films which again spoke to a huge audience and made Kieślowski an international figure, the prophet of a new kind of cinema that seemed to deal with alienation, other features that are universal features of the modern world, but at the same time from a very distinctively Polish point of view. We reached 1989, of course. I'm not going to dwell on in this context. That's a rather muddy photograph that I took in Krakow. It was only a mobile phone. Mobile phones weren't so good in those days. But I recorded the whole dialogue on that phone, because it's a very important dialogue between two of the great survivors, Andrzej Wajda and Marczewski, who discussed at a European film conference in Baranami in Krakow, their experiences of censorship. It was an absolutely riveting conversation, because they talked about the sense of a cat and mouse game that they played with the censors. First you give, then you take. There are certain things you can say directly, things you can only say indirectly. How to be confrontational with the censor. It gave an insight, I think, into something which is often forgotten in discussions of the apparatus of censorship, which was that across the entire Eastern Bloc, certainly in Soviet Russia and in many other Eastern European communist countries, there was a give and take between the apparatus of censorship and the leading filmmakers. Important filmmakers like Wajda, like Marchevsky, could say more and do more because they could barter their international reputation. And the desire that those countries had to be present on the world stage. And this, I think, is a very interesting issue, to what extent these films were both escaping the normal parameters of censorship, and yet were also speaking for the countries that they represented, and creating, someone hinted, I think, earlier this afternoon, the appearance of a more liberal climate at home, by representing a more liberal stance at international film festivals and in circulation. So there are many different layers to this, which we won't have time to go into now. And so we reach Borys's film, Rewers. And the reason I've inflicted that short primer on you is to suggest that I think Rewers really comes out of a very strong and distinctive Polish tradition in filmmaking, which is to dig deep and to deal with matters of big history, matters of big politics, at the level of individual morality, and to do so with a very distinctive form of dark humour. This is an astonishingly black film in all sorts of ways, and it engages from the standpoint of 2009 with a very important period, which is the immediate post-war period, which I think is a period that obviously needs revisiting, certainly in a very different register from the heroic revisiting of earlier generations of filmmakers. And I want to begin ask Boris, what was the climate, the political climate, when you started working on the film? Just.
It was 2008, probably, when we started with Andrzej Bart thinking about the idea of the Rewers, and it was the moment when leading worldview in Poland then was, I would call it, capitalistic national Catholic. Nationalists that ruled then in Poland, their perspective, as I believed, was that the nation is always innocent. The nation is always innocent and is always a victim. So it also means that everything is black or white. And I opposed. I felt that it's not true. And I searched for the idea that would tell this story in a different way, the way I would find much more close to my point of view. The beginning, though, was really innocent, because the basic idea was that I wanted to make a film about a woman or women. I didn't exactly know why, maybe because I like this kind of films. And I was thinking, I remember about Cassavetes' Woman Under Influence. The Polish title actually is Kobiety pod presją, so women under oppression. and then Andrzej, the writer, told me about the character he created for his novel he wrote like 20 years earlier. Her name was Sabina, and the action took place during Stalinism, and she had a situation with the Secret Service agent, and she committed suicide in the novel. And he told me that for the novel he created 30 or 40 characters, but after 20 years he still is haunted by this girl, and he thought that it was a really bad idea to let her die. So when I when I told him that I want to make a film about women, he thought that he can resurrect her in a way. and he changed the story, and it was the beginning of the script. So it was quite innocent. I had no idea that it would be about Stalinism, and I start to learn about this period. Start from reading Diaries of Tyrmand from 1954, and of course different positions then. So I was thinking about this nationalist myth of symbiotic unity, that symbiotic unity of everybody with Poland. Because it was then, in 2008, 2009, I thought it was a main instrument of historical policy, which will tell how it is possible that Stalinism did happen. How is it possible that People's Republic of Poland did happen? As I said, nationalists believe that nation is always innocent. So they had to figure it out somehow. And then in the film we'll see that some part of the nation is just outcast, and it comes from the really far past. It comes from I would believe 19th century, as you probably know. That Poland was one of the last countries that made abolition of slaves. We can call you actually peasants from the second half of 19th century slaves. So that was the beginning.
Yes, it does. As you said, the fact that it started from the idea of a woman at the centre is very interesting, because certainly the dominant traditions of Polish cinema are very male-centred, and this is a remarkable film because it is from a woman's point of view, and that I think makes it takes it in a new direction, and it makes me think also that when you talk about the national historical myth, which is one which sees the country, the nation, in a maternal light, and here you're chipping away at that. It's a film which chips away at many facades, many myths, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. The thing is that right-wing felt them, or they feel the same way too now, that they are representative of the nation, and they couldn't separate themselves from a collectivity, and they look for a force in the collectivity. So in fact, I believe they don't have too much of their own matter, and they are like eternal unborn child in this national matrix. So maybe that's the reason why women have a value of matrix, the matrix which you have to control, which has to be controlled, and maybe that's the idea. I think it was kind of a rebel. I felt like a rebel at that moment. I thought that it's the right thing to make a woman a main character.
We talked about the problem of how to not give away the entire plot of the film, but we decided there's no way of not doing that. So, do you want to say something about the general storyline before we look at perhaps the first extract?
Yes, we have the extract. So the year is 1952. The year is 1952. It is a moment when the Palace of Culture is just about to start to be built. And the main characters are these three, I would say, post-noble women, grandmother, mother, and daughter, coming from Warsaw intelligentsia. You see, mother does appreciate that they lived in a pretty comfortable apartment, and of course remembers they had a pharmacy before the war that was nationalized, but still she thinks that safety is the most important thing. Daughter Sabina, she's working in the publishing house. Her brother Arkadiusz is a painter and drunk who sold his soul to the socialist realism and to the camera. He's painting these posters of women on the tractors, and there is a grandmother. Of course, the most important thing, because it starts really like a comedy. It's almost grotesque. She's almost 30, and the main concern of mother and grandmother is her to be married, and it's not so easy, as you see, stay before the screen. Sabina tries to hide this golden dollar, so she tries to be against the system in the way. She believes it's the right thing. So only devil can know, as you have seen. As Ian said, it's impossible to avoid spoilers at this point. So I can tell right now that actually the guy she'll meet and she will fall in love, who pretends to be someone else, knows. And how come? Of course, how come? How is it possible? On the mirror on the wall, is possible. People can know about it. So it was the basic idea we had with Andrzej Bart. It works actually as a really great metaphor of the system that the government or the rulers know. They even know what's in the belly, in the stomach of their citizens. And it was the beginning of the story. Actually, when we were talking about it.
So let me just ask you a question about now that people have got a sense of what the film looks like. Mm-hmm. My sense is that you're really doing something quite remarkable at this point. This is 2009. Mm-hmm. You're making a film in black and white, mm-hmm. in which you're recreating the climate mm-hmm. of Poland just back at the end of the 1940s, mm-hmm. and nobody else is doing this, are they?
No, not so often. Right now, there's wonderful Polish film Ida, made by Paweł Pawlikowski. But then it was something really, and it was thanks to my producer who took this risk, because everybody was actually thinking that we are crazy. Nobody believed that it can be a success. And film about Stalins in black and white, black comedy. They thought that we are really like mad. But somehow I still had a belief in the audience, and I think I was right then.
Well, yeah, I think you were right too. But I just want to kind of stay a moment on the sense of you going against the tide, because of course other countries had their retro films, and you might almost say there's a wave of retrospection sweeping Europe, particularly after '89. This is not a film about '89, of course it's a post-'89 film, but it's a film in which, at long last, if you like, a Polish filmmaker decides to look back at a period which has really not been treated. Because the whole contour, the whole direction of Polish cinema, the directions have been very different, and they tended much more towards the public.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always loved the cinema. I was really influenced by it. There's no matter to absolutely yes. I was studying it. I knew it from an early childhood, and a lot of these films I've seen many times. So it was really obvious choice. Besides, actually, it's not really original answer. I've heard many times from Schindler from Spielberg to Haneke, but it was my experience too. When I was thinking about these times, I always seen black and white, because and it's strange, because when I'm thinking about different period of time, let's say Rococo, I see it in color, but the main material, the main footage we have is black and white, so my imagination moved that way. It was for me very obvious choice.
Okay. And we have this wonderful kind of symbolic kind of swallowing liberty.
Mm-hmm. You know, of course, what comes next, because it's not the only time she does it. It's a process, so you can imagine, you know, how this process looks like.
There's no need to dwell on that. Yes.
Well,
so everyone can imagine it.
Anyway, there is few candidates for Sabina to be her husband, and they are all horrible. Until the moment when she's coming back from her publishing house at night, and she's attacked by some guys, and then he appears, and he looks like Humphrey Bogart, and he's handsome and fantastic and charming, and he woos her, and she's absolutely, you know, she falls in love immediately. So it's really wonderful moment when they fall in love, but pretty soon she realized that he's not what he was saying he is. Actually, he's Secret Service agent, and he asks her for making relations on her boss from the publishing house. So of course it's a horrible moment, because first of all it was love that he was pretending. Secondly, this is the thing she can't do, she can't accept, and she kills him. She kills him, and it's the crime that is very serious thing to kill a Secret Service agent. Then, but what's his mom for? So mother comes back and helps her to escape from the situation, and because they have a pharmacy and she knows things about acid, they just dissolve the body. They dissolve the body, and Sabina buries the bones on the construction site of the Palace of Culture that you probably seen in famous gift from Comrade Stalin that is still here. So you can say that that's another metaphor that this building is actually the foundation of it, the bones of a Secret Service agent killed by Sabina, by this woman from post-novel intelligentsia.
What I like, what I really like enormously about the film is the way that it plays with different genres. This is a film which is not only breaking new ground, I think, ideologically, in the flow of Polish cinema, and dealing with a very important period, but it's also a film which is very alert to different genres. I mean, there's a kind of reference to the Gothic tradition of the House of Mystery, where dark things happen. Arsenic and old lace.
It's there, yes, and the film noir, I would say.
And film noir,
yes.
And a wonderful sort of parody of The Tall Dark Stranger.
That's right.
So it's very knowing in the way that it draws genres together. Actually, of course, a number of filmmakers have been doing this in quite different ways. Woody Allen has done this, for instance, at different points in his career. He's mixed genres. But it's unusual, I think, to do it in the context of Polish cinema also.
Well, I'm a cinephile, and it was my first film, and the beginning was, as I said, not from I didn't want to make a film about Stalinism or to something so serious. The main need was to make a film because I love making films. It was my debut, so it was the basic thing. All this comes later. Actually, I see it as a progress, I must say, because I learned a lot making this. I learned a lot reading or hearing from people later on. And even now, today, from time to time, I quote Bożena Kev's article. It was probably one of the most important texts written about Rewers. And thanks to it, I understood, for example, completely different Bronek, the Secret Service guy, because I've seen it in the context. I try to share here with you, because of course. Then I was thinking a rather easier way that he's a devil, that the system was evil, and the guy's devil. He knows about the coin, about swallowing the coin, and it was simply. And then I start to think about who Bronek really is, and where is he coming from, and then I learned so much about the history, and the fact that 90% of us in Poland comes from slaves, and it's absolutely not present in a discourse we have here, was changing my perspective on him. As you see, the basic line goes between people that are normal, regular, normal, and people that are which are new. So new are probably not normal, right? And that's actually the background of Bronisław, that's the background of this Secret Service agent. So normals, let's call them that way. It's us. These ladies, our main characters, they are normal because before the war they had something, they were educated, they share traditional values, where the family is on the highest rank. There's one moment, maybe I won't show it, I just tell you how it goes on the screen. Because when she poisons him and she kills him, and this death is really painful and it lasts a while, she says to him, "You could be such a good mechanic." and of course it could happen thanks to the squire's grace, right? So with this predominance that was carried on for centuries, with the feeling that ladies are noble men, know what's best for the peasant like him, they say that he could be a good mechanic. And I think that Bronek, when I think about him now, not as a devil but as a human, he could probably be told how can he matter in this world of Stalinism or communism. And he knew exactly what's the model, how this noble peasant-like weave, this eternal entanglement in which actually there are not people on both sides. There are not people. On one side there's a squire, on the other side there are these peasants. Toporek, his name is Toporek. It sounds really poor in Polish. Toporek. Yeah, peasants. So on one side you have those who hate. On the one side you have those who disguise, on the other side you have those who hate. On the one side you have those who oppress, on the other side you have those who steal. So that's a basic model of Polish traditional culture. This raging ambition not to be F-word, right? And it's like a basic Polish understanding of social contract.
In a way, what you're showing in the film, I mean, it's grounded in a certain social reality. The families of women left after the war, the phenomenon which is widespread across Europe, of course, after the deaths of the Second World War. But at the same time, what's interesting in the film is that all the vestiges of pre-war life, as you say, traditional life, are still present. but they're distorted. And so what we're actually seeing in the course of the film is this perversion or distortion of the traditional structures of Polish life, which has been brought about both by the war and by the new regime.
Well, maybe we touch with the most important thing in the film, in my understanding of that story, because I believe that what we have now, and it's of course a fruit of the situation of the past, is that the amnesia reigns around in Poland. And it's like one huge displacement of our personal participation in past, in any complexity of the past. So nuance, normals, they don't differ so much. Actually, as Kev says, not so much as Homo sapiens differs from Neanderthal, right? So that's why they can have a baby together. So as you saw, she lights a candle for a brother. But what's more said, Sabina's son has information about his father, the total lie. So it's actually funny, but if we think about it, what it really means, that mother lied to us about our father, I think it's a good question. It was one of the most provoking things I found in the script. So basically it means that there's no like a white stain. She had to create whole story beyond, whole background, whole completely light history of the family of his father. So what he gets a pretty standard story of a hero of underground. And so a woman rising the next generation passes on this national myth, saying the father was a hero. He was sent to Siberia, he was imprisoned, he was killed. There's many different versions of that story, but it was happening for such a long time. And in that way, you can say that Bronek is an image of descendant of these peasants who were helping Tsar's army to kill insurgents during the January uprising. It's still there. This border. It's basically that's the most horrible thing, I believe, that our nation is still totally divided, and it's in rhetoric that politicians are using almost every day. We are here, you are there, and these are the ideas I found much later on. So in that way, making a film is a wonderful adventure, kind of a journey that it's a process, because I still learn from this film and from these things that he provoked between me and the audience.
I think your ability to talk about the film is remarkable. It's not easy for a filmmaker to talk about their own film.
Yeah, and, especially before you've seen the film.
I'm afraid we've ruined that for all those who are potentially going to see it for the first time. But I hope people will, because it's a film of great, I think, of great originality and great skill, and also full of surprises. Even though you know the general contours of it now, it's still full of surprises. I mean, in one sense, what you've said there is very interesting, because you've talked about it in a very specific Polish cultural, historical context, what it means for you. Mm-hmm. For somebody from the outside, what I see it in is two traditions. One, of course, is the as playing against the heroic mode that a certain kind of Polish cinema established, where everyone is a hero, often a Pyrrhic hero who goes down fighting,
Yeah, that's right.
which was the original template that was created, if you like, in the early films of Vaida, but undercut in the early films of Munch, where nobody is a hero. Really. So that dialectic is present from the beginning of post-war Polish cinema. But also, of course, it's part of that great wave that sweeps across European cinema, which has been a sort of painful coming to terms with the fact that the idea of every person in an occupied country being either an active or a passive resistor is not true.
No.
And if we look at French cinema, which has perhaps been the most spectacular example of that, the slow process of coming to terms with, as it were, uncovering the true history of occupied France has been played out over 2 or 3 decades, and is still going on. And so you can see in cinema as a public medium, I think, a process of coming to terms with national myths, and more than national myths, with myths that actually are Europe-wide myths that cover the whole of once occupied Europe, which was seen initially in very simplistic terms of everyone on the side of good, except that they're being repressed by the forces of occupation, or later the forces of repression, state repression. But of course the truth is more complex, and in its anecdotal, allegorical form, it seems to me this film really probes those myths and also discusses why people want them to be in place. Why they have a lasting significance. They don't just go away. They're very slow to be chipped away at. And I think in that sense it does contribute to a kind of Europe-wide mood. We've seen obviously other films from Germany, France, from other countries which have again engaged with national myths and have paid often be very shocking. I mean, you may remember, for instance, Hiroshima Mon Amour, one of the key landmarks in made by Alain Bernet, who died recently, one of the films that established the idea of the French New Wave, sold as a film about the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima, but its real story is about what happened during the épuration, during the treatment of French people who were accused of consorting with Germans, which of course was a massive reality, as yet unacknowledged in French cinema. That was the real scandal of Hiroshima Mon Amour. It's a film about France, much more than it's a film about Japan. But that process has continued down the decades, and I have a sense that, but correct me if I'm wrong, and there may be others who know better than me, I think Polish cinema has had difficulty in engaging with the realities of the post-war world.
I agree 100%. And it's, I was saying about it before, it's this leading worldview here in Poland that says that we are innocent and we are a victim. We are always the victim, we are always the martyrs. And that's something I will oppose always. I see it as a masochistic and not necessary anymore. And with my movies, I would love to fight with it. I would love to show you that there is other perspective for these films.
You've worked, since you made Rewers, you've worked in television. You made a TV series into Paradox. Is television been different? Has it allowed you or others to talk about things that you couldn't do in feature films?
To be frank, it was just a job.
Right.
It was I knew then that I want to make my next film based on a novel by Zygmunt Miłoszewski, and it's a crime novel, A Grain of Truth. So I thought that I can practice making a genre movies, because it's of course completely different than Rewers, for example. So I was practicing there, and it was just a tool actually. I used to be more secure during this production. I just finished, because I finished my shoot like 2 weeks ago and just started my post-production right now.
Okay, maybe we ought to take advantage of we've got a bit of time, I think, to ask if anybody wants to join in and ask any questions. Some of you, I think, know the film, and it might be a good opportunity if you want to pick up on any of the things that Boris has said.
Some of us here in the room know about the reaction to this movie.
Yeah.
Could you please tell a little bit for those who don't know it?
Yeah. The
Reaction of the reviews and things like that.
Yeah, no, indeed, I was going to. What was the response to the film?
Response
critical, otherwise.
It was unbelievable, actually. Well, it was my first film. I didn't suspect anything. I just want to make it, and it won actually like everything that was possible to win in Poland that year. It was a Polish entry for an Academy Award, and it was critically acclaimed, and the box office was pretty good because it was on this top 10 list for many, many weeks. And if you think that it's black and white, it's about Stalinism, and the audience rather prefers Twilight, nowadays it was really surprising. So it was like a tsunami for me. I really needed to take a break and think what I want to do next because it was so unexpected.
Were there any negative responses to the film?
Well, that was the most horrible thing. That actually not. I remember a screening I had for Polish Parliament, for Parliament members, and actually from right to left, from left to right, everybody loved it from different reasons.
That's worrying.
It was very boring. Especially, I remember this woman from PiS, from Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, Law and Justice Party, right-wing party. She when she stand up and said, "Did I understand you correctly? You try to say that the evil is coming from generation to generation, that it's like contagious." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because as we see, when the son of Sabinas and this guy comes back, it doesn't represent the civilization of life." So sometimes it's really difficult to explain, and I had to tolerate a lot of things. So basically, I quote many times today Bożena Kertésza because it was the only text, critical text, that moved me and inspired me, and it was not necessarily nice for me. In many points, I felt that she kicked my, but it was inspiring and provoking, and that's why I still remember it, and that's why I wanted to share it with you today.
Of course, I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, but it's important to say it. I did some work in Britain on the idea of cultural impact of films, where we tried to find ways of measuring the cultural impact that films have. We took British cinema from 1945 to 2009, and we tried by empirical means to establish the films that had maximum cultural impact. And I think it's possible to develop a methodology for doing this. But what is obviously clear is that films provide a kind of focal point for moments of collective reflection. The apparatus of producing a film, releasing it, people writing about it, audiences seeing it, talking about it, is a natural focus for discussion. And in this way, films can do really quite profound things. They can have long-lasting effects, like dropping a stone in a pond, which goes on rippling. And just to give you a completely different example, we discovered two films in Britain, which you possibly know because they've been distributed all over the world. One is The Full Monty, and the other is Trainspotting. These are widely considered by people in Britain of all ages and genders and regions to be among the most influential British films, which is strange and puzzling because they appear to represent very partial points of view, but they're felt to articulate an outlook, a point of view, and they stay with people.
That's a very interesting thing that Andrzej Wajda said once about Full Monty. I remember it now. He believed, I believe, it is possible, but he said it's not possible to make a film like Full Monty in Poland because, you know, steel workers in Poland can't strip, you know, they are part of the national myth, they are part of solidarity. So here we go again, right?
Nice. Yes, well, I did a program for BBC radio earlier this year, actually before Wajda finished his film Lankoszem, in which I reflected on the history of Wajda's films and how Wajda's films have presented Polish history to us. And what many people in Britain know of Polish history comes almost exclusively from a series of Wajda's films. It's a heavy responsibility to bear, to be the standard bearer of the national narrative. But I just wanted to open this out a little bit too, because the Full Monty is a very good example. It's a film which has gone to every country in the world. The phrase "the Full Monty" has now been taken up in many, many languages. It's become a vehicle for political protest, believe it or not, in half a dozen countries. It's an extraordinary indicator of how a film can actually leave a trail of cultural impact across the world. But nationally, films, of course, can often provoke a kind of popular reflection on moments in history. And I have a suspicion that maybe the impact of Rewers was that it did make people think about, as it were, the succession of generations. Because one of the great strengths of the film is that in its humorous, dark way, it does make you think about the line that stretches from the immediate post-war period right up to the present, and that, I think, is one of its great achievements. It connects the stages in a very interesting way. I think that's it. Thank you very much, Boris.